Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of Chop It Up here at Slanguage Studio. I'm Mario Ybarra Jr., here with our co founder of Slanguage, Karla Diaz. Karla, can you say hi and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Introduce yourself.
So my name is Karla Diaz, like you said, and I am the co-founder of Slanguage Studio. I'm also an artist and a writer. And yeah, what else do you want me to tell you?
Can you tell us a little bit about your history,
History, just in terms
your
of,
biographical history? Where you from,
oh,
eh?
okay. I'm like, which histories? I have many histories. Sorry. Um, so where I'm from, I was born here in LA and in Hollywood, California.
Uy,
Yeah,
Hollywood.
I know. I didn't even believe it either when my mom told me I was really, I was born in Hollywood. Okay, anyway, so I was born in Hollywood and a couple of months, I think maybe it was actually like a year and a half when my mother took me to Mexico to grow up with my in the care. She left me in the care of my maternal grandparents and her younger brother, my uncle, and his wife, my aunt. So I grew up there until about the age of 10 or 11. I can't really
What
remember,
was
but
it like
around
grow
that
up in
time.
Mexico? Did you grow up on a rancho? Did you grow up in the city? Where'd you grow up in Mexico?
Yeah, so essentially it was, I mean, it wasn't a rancho because we didn't have that much money to have like the big estate of the rancho and all that stuff, but it was very rural area and the place at that time, it was very unpopulated. So it was still, people were coming in and buying pieces of land and they could build their home and stuff like that. So my my mother had been sending a little bit of money to my grandfather to build the house there, and that's actually how my grandfather uh, built the house that I grew up in. And over the years, they expanded and they added a little bit of additions as they kept my mom sending money. But essentially, that was it. And I grew up. My grandfather used to be. I mean, he had many professions. He was a cop. He was a carnicero, a meat butcher, right? I guess that's how you translate it, butcher. I mean, he had many different professions, but so he knew a lot of stuff in it, and he loved gardening, and he knew how to, um, grow things. So he would, he planted a bunch of trees in our little backyard that we had after my mother had sent the money and had raised enough so that, he could build upon the place, the land where they had bought. And so, he planted flowers and, different types of fruit trees. And I mean, everything. He built everything essentially. He was a builder. So I remember admiring my grandfather a lot because he was actually such a great model for making and maker, when even he, like, I remember like trying to put like bricks together as he built the different layers of our house and him showing me how to mix, the cement so that he could put that. And I mean, I was just a little kid, but I don't know how much help I was, but that kind of stuff, how to, I think in a lot of ways, growing up in that area also taught me about like being able to make things ourselves, even things that might seem like necessities or basic things that a city or a government, or sometimes I think growing up in other parts like here, we take for granted. So, for instance, I remember us putting actually the plumbing to our city drainage. We didn't have that. We didn't have like toiletry things that were in place already or water sources that were already available, which was really horrible, because we did have one of the things that I've always, even as a child, like kind of remember being so prominent in my head and like being very conflicted about it was that we didn't have clean water, drinkable water, but yet Coca Cola and the bottles of Coca Cola were so apt to like, they could access those places that were, so remote, and they could, reach these communities that were so far into like with barely having the basic necessities. But this was like a big company, fancy company that, could ship their glass bottles or their fancy bottles to us. And so for a long, long time, I wouldn't drink, my family never drank water because it wasn't as readily accessible as clean water. So we drank Coca-Cola, we drank Pepsi.
So your grandfather was there in Mexico was a great example of do it yourself, kind of roll up your sleeves, create your own space, put in your own plumbing, stuff like that. But you also grew up with your grandmother, and what kind of influence did she have on you?
Yeah, my grandmother was an amazing soul. I mean, she was really strong in her own way and not as strong as personality as my grandfather, but she was a storyteller, and she was certainly a social, more of a social person than my grandfather. My grandfather was really hangry all the time, like he was grouchy all the time, and he didn't really like people. I guess that was like his ex-cop kind of attitude, like, people would come in and he would always presume the worst in people and be like, this motherfucker, what
They were
does he
all
want?
suspects.
And like, suspectful. Yeah, I don't know about that motherfucker. And like, he's a fucking idiot. And like, he would just be like blatantly like saying this stuff. And I'd be like, oh my God, what? This is just my
So he
friend.
was not just a
So,
cop, he was also the judge.
yeah, and like I said, it was probably that kind of cop mentality that he had, bless his heart, but he also had a very hard life, and so I'm not even presuming to judge him. So my grandmother was always more like the bearer of those things, poor her soul, but she was very more social, so more apt to like having conversations with people. I mean, they also, both of them, like in later in their lives when I was there with them, they couldn't really retire. They were already past the age of retirement, but in Mexico, it's not like such a thing of like retirement unless there's like you make certain big money and you have certain things. But so there's no such thing the government gives you to retire. I mean, you work until you die, or you can't even move or whatever. So my grandparents used to sell things from door to door. Like they used to go to different towns and sell clothes and sell like trinkets, and that's how they make their little bit of money, to survive and for us to eat and things like that. So my grandmother had to have, I believe, that kind of more of a social connection or up to conversation with people. But even in her moments which she didn't like it, she was still grouchy. She'd be like, what the hell are you doing that? Get out of here,
But so she was a saleswoman, social
Yeah, so
salesperson.
there was a point of interference where she knew she had to be social and that people would have to like her, but
She had her limits. But then you also grew up with your tío and your tía who were younger, right? And I suspect that they were also very much like your playmates and encouraged your imagination.
So they
How
were
did they
yeah.
influence you?
Well, I think they're the ones that influenced me the most because, like I said, my grandparents were like, in their older age, like, I just want to go to sleep, like, leave me alone sometimes.
Yeah.
Even though, like I said, they had their own personality, their own creativity, their own amazingness. But my uncle and my aunt really were the ones that I think nourished sort of my creativity and my playfulness. Like my uncle was an ex-hippie. He actually came here to the United States and was living here for a while, like in the 1960s and 70s, and left back to Mexico. And so a lot of his ideas and his values and his tastes in like music and certain aesthetics were from here, from the United States, and from an American culture. If that makes sense. So when my uncle would get drunk, that's when he would play this American music, like Led Zeppelin. He would be like playing it really loud with really all the neighbors and everybody, my grandparents, my whole family were like, fuck this motherfucker, like he's already, like, it's too loud and it's past midnight. And I would be like, yeah, like my uncle got drunk. I would get up from bed and sneak out and be like hanging out with him, and I could
So
have
you were
these
his
moments.
cheerleader, his creative cheerleader.
I guess I was a support system, And I would then the day after, like when he was sober, he was like, I don't remember all that. I was like, Uncle, you remember? And then that, and I remember. And he's like, I don't remember all that. And he didn't want to really talk to me about it. But I was all like, shoot, are you gonna get drunk tonight? Are you gonna get drunk tonight? Do
So
you want me to get your beer?
his muse would come at the night
And with alcohol.
and with alcohol
Yeah.
and rock and roll music, and he would write poems and be creative at night, and you would hear the loud music and wake up and go join him. And what would you do when you joined him?
Well, I would, when he would play the music, obviously I'd be dancing and singing whatever I could. So of course, I didn't know how to speak English, but I would just go with the tunes, and like try to like mimic the stuff and make up the words.
Yeah.
Or I would try to write things on my own,
Yeah.
like as I was listening to. And then what started happening with him is he would write these poems, and I would recite them for like political events or celebrating a certain hero, or like Benito Juarez, or like, but they were all my uncle's poems, but I would memorize them and then recite them at City Hall in the town or whatever. And so it was almost like, even though he didn't, like I said, he didn't necessarily felt like, oh, maybe he could share, like he could share with me in that way, like I knew that. And throughout the year, even now, like, I mean, he's still alive, thank God. Like he still shares his philosophical ways of the world and his love poems and his experiences, and he's very, very hippie in that way.
Yeah, so he kind of helped install the creative philosophy in you, right?
Yeah.
But your tia was also very creative with you as your caretaker,
Yes,
and you
so
would
they
tell
never
stories with her and
they
stuff
never
like
had
that.
children. My aunt couldn't have children, unfortunately, so I was really like her child, in a way, like she raised me as her daughter. And so she would play with me, we would tell stories, and then we had this thing where we got up to, like, somebody give us like this little recorder, like one of my cousins or my aunt or somebody left like a recorder from here, like it must have been a very old recorder, but still recorded like things and tapes and cassettes. So we had an idea, and I told my aunt, oh, we should make a novela. And she's like, yeah, let's make the novela. So I remember kind of sitting like in the space, and we would tell the story, and like we would make the man's voice and the guy's voice and the kid's voice. And then we would be like, okay, now we got to make the sound as if they're coming in. So we would have bricks like the tacones, cha, 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 make the sounds all dramatic.
The sound effects?
I can make it, hizo esto, So like all the sound effects of that. And that was so much fun, like so amazing to play in that way. And we would start cracking up, and then we will make up characters. And she's still like that. Thank God that she's still alive too. Like when we talk, we always have our conversations, and she's like, do you remember when we used to do this? And I'm like, yes, remember. And do you remember when we used to sell nopales door to door when we needed money so we can buy a tape so we can record our sessions? I was like, yes, I remember that. So yeah, even though, like I said, there was certain things that I mean, as a child, like I still had to work. I remember like I hated waking up early, because that was like here it was like 4 o'clock in the morning when we used to wake up, or around that time, because we had to get everything together. We had to go to different towns to get all those things, and I didn't want to go to work. And so anyway, but
When you say work, you mean going to help your grandparents sell stuff?
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So, and I even hated to wake up early to go to school. I mean, I was always late, because when I had to go do that, because I hated waking up early. But in that instance, when, we had to do it, so those things about working as children, and, there's no laws like that in place. I mean, a lot of the children have to help their families and their parents work at a very young age so that they can support the rest of the family. And so for me, it was, even though, like I said, I have a spacing of like playfulness, and I wouldn't change it for the world, like in my upbringing in the area, and that I knew that there were lack of resources and money, et cetera, like there was still these moments of levity and playfulness and making the best of,
Yeah.
like, despite the
Imagination.
circumstances, and imagination and playfulness that I so cherish, and I'm so happy
And storytelling, imagination.
Yeah, I mean,
rolling up your sleeves, doing things yourself.
yeah. And my uncle people loved him. I mean, he's so charismatic. People want to be around him. He's that kind of type of person. Like,
And today he's a healer, right?
yeah. So before I go into that, like, I remember, as like when you mentioned storytelling, like every evening, because we don't have, I mean, we had a TV, but it only got like one channel, you know? So it wasn't like we were like connected and we wanted as a family in the evening, what do you do? So what he would say is he would gather all the neighborhood kids, and most of them like kids, some adults, some young teens like in their mid 20s, and we would tell stories. We would share our stories, conversations, jokes. He loved jokes. So I really think he taught me the art of storytelling in that way, or emphasized that creative part of me.
So he was
Because
kind of like your first storytelling
yeah,
teacher.
I mean, he was the one that nicknamed everybody in the neighborhood. He
Yeah.
nicknamed everybody in our family. And so, like, there was this kid, for instance, that he had a bicycle, and one time he had an accident and he broke the bicycle, right? So the two-wheeler. So then he started calling him one wheeler because okay, for his bicycle,
How was it in Spanish?
Una llanta,
Una llanta,
Yeah,
that was
una
his
llanta.
name.
Una llanta. I'm telling you, I had no idea. I didn't even know my cousin's name until like they got married and we were older, because I always remember them as like Chivo, Conejo, or, you know, all of these names, nicknames. And so he has, yeah, and people receive that really well, as a kind of endearing term
Yeah.
to be called something. I
They
mean,
weren't taking it. He was
no, it
disrespectful.
wasn't just taking it as a kind of,
But it's also to remember them because everybody's named Juan, Mario,
right.
Victor. So it's like, how do you say, oh, everybody has the same names in a barrio. So you have to have a nickname because there's
Yeah.
20 Juans, pero there's one Una Llanta, right?
Right. El llantas, el chiquis, like la truquis, like there was always like some kind of nickname.
Yeah.
My friend was called El Virote because he was like really light skin and red hair. And I don't know, I guess my uncle associated him that he kind of looked like a virote because he was a little bit tan, but he still had that kind of crispiness to him.
And
I
a
have no
virote
idea.
is a bread roll.
A bread roll, yeah. So a couple years, like this was before any of them passed away, my grandparents and so forth. I went to visit my grandfather, and my tia told me, oh, this is Juan, I think was his name. He said, this is Juan. Do you remember him? And it was this big guy, bodybuilder guy, like there that in the city, in the town, And I was like, do you remember Juan? And I was like, I don't know, So I was a kid, and he's like, that's Pirote. And I was like, oh, Pirote. Like I was like Pirote, like from a kid, like red hair, all mugroso, like, and then he's like, oh shit, like that's Pirote. So anyway, it was kind of nice to kind of connect in that way.
Your first teachers with your abuelo, your abuela, your tío, your tía were kind of, they gave you like these first models of like how to be, and then you came to the United States, and then you went to school, and on top of course your mother and the people in your family here, you were also very lucky to have some pretty amazing storytelling teachers in the community and in school. Can you tell us a little bit about some of these teachers, because they're almost
Yeah.
like a who's who of storytellers in the Los Angeles writing community?
Yeah, I mean, well, I've been really blessed to have that experience first with my junior high school teacher, who is an amazing poet, writer, Seshu Foster. And he was my junior high school English teacher for a year, I think. And he was very much, I think, not necessarily in terms of his personality about like, let's share stories, but I think he definitely opened up the space to create so that we could share stories. And so he started like an after school poetry club space in his classrooms, which is something that he wasn't being paid for. Like I'm sure like a lot of teachers, after their teaching day is over, they just want to go home to their families or whatever. But he decided, okay, he was going to spend some of this time after school so that we could meet in his room and start this club, which we name ourselves Poet Beyond Madness. Woo, Poet Beyond Madness, right? So
BM.
yeah, that's right. And so, we were like, my skills in terms of English were not up to par, what I would say, in terms of being even grammatically correct or anything. But I think it really influenced me in terms of my poetic view of the world. And I knew that there was something in my head like that I wanted to kind of translate visually, that maybe I just didn't necessarily have the words in English, but that I wanted to express them, And so I still have some of those poems, and I'm like, what the hell was I saying? Or what? I don't even understand this, right? So imagine him reading this, and thank God he didn't say, like, this is crap, like, throw it away. But he really saw something there um, that encouraged me, to
Yeah,
do
but
that.
shout out to Seshu Foster. But he was from pretty much that neighborhood too, so
Yes.
he knew the kind of students that he was going to be having in his classes. But he also understood the potential that you all had. And then, not too long after Seshu was your middle school teacher at Hollenbeck, you went on to Plaza de la Raza. Can you tell us about what that experience was
Yeah.
like?
So in Plaza de la Raza, so I got a flyer at my junior high school at Hollenbach in East LA, and it said free theater classes, and being such an avid one, like I said, learner. I've always been like that. Like I figured, like, I want to take as many things as I want. I want to be exposed to as many things as I want. And especially because it said free. So I was like, hell, I'm there. Right. So I went to the place, I took the bus, and they had this summer program there at Plaza. And I really liked it. I felt connected not only to the place there, because it's an amazing, I don't think there's
Yeah, explain to us what
I
Plaza
don't
is.
think
Can you just give us
there's
a
a
brief
like
description of
to.
what Plaza is?
I mean, Plaza is supposed to be a visual and performing arts school, and most of it is like free or low of charge to based on income and the community there. But I essentially took it for free, because of my economic status with my family. But it's centered in Lincoln Park, in the heart, one of the hearts of the community there, and they have classes in everything. I mean, in music and dance and theater and visual arts. And what was so great about this place, and I can't describe it. I mean, I've been all over the world now to different places and different communities, and there's no replica of Plaza, because it's really a home. Like, it's really values and encourages and supports the young people there. It's like a tiny little mini school, but mostly like home based, not even a school, because school was like boring and like assignments. This is really fun and interactive. And so I started going there, and because of the theater, my connection with theater, I took a couple of classes there up to high school in the theater with the amazing direction of BJ Dodge, who again is an amazing mentor woman. Really an amazing human being in terms of how she's able to generate not only the place and the kind of community work that she was doing at Plaza, but just to really value the individual, uh, like contribution, and getting those skills out of the students, and really validating that, so that's a very hard skill to do as a kind of director, as an observer, as a teacher, And so creating that safe space for the stories to be told through theater, through performance, through dance, through the visual scenery. I mean, connecting all the visual arts really is in theater, singing, dancing, right? All of this stuff, music, because I even got a chance to write some of my own music that was actually produced for some of the plays. I got to later on, code write a play for one of the anniversaries of the shows of Plaza with my friend Saida Trujillo, who I love dearly, and we grew up going there. So this space, but what was really interesting also, besides having these theater classes, whatever the time was, is that we had amazing teaching assistants that we also kind of shared space with, communicated, sort of were there to help us. And also Maria at Plaza de la Raza, who's a director now, who was a thriving force in terms of support. She would, like, somebody would say, hey, there's a casting call for so and so, can you recommend a group of kids? And of course she would recommend
Maria
us.
was a great connector for you guys.
She was a great connector and resourcer, but also really thriving in terms of understanding bringing access and bringing people there, like
Resources.
resources. I mean, actors, like when they were interviewed, like they wanted to come to Plaza, and she would have the kids there with them to try to connect with them.
So
And
so through Plaza, you were also connected to CalArts with their CAP program or the
right,
Community Arts
yes,
Partnership Program
right,
and the awesome Glenna Avila. Can you
right.
tell us how that connection was
Well,
made?
that's what one of the CAP program, the Community Arts Partnership Program, started with Cal Arts in partnership with many different communities all over Los Angeles. So the idea was to do programming in all of these different centers and hosting the different groups or class that were CAP classes, right? And part of that funding came from Cal Arts, also for the teachers, for the faculty, for the TAs, for the production of whatever, depending on the class, whether it was a music class or a theater class or whatever. So this class that I happened to take was a CAP class that was hosted at Plaza de la Raza. And so my connection, that's my first connection. BJ was a faculty at Cal Arts at the time, teaching in the theater school. And so that was really my connection to higher education in terms of college, right, and an arts college. And so I remember even at that time taking trips to Cal Arts, going there and being so fun, and they would give us a tour of the dorms, the different facilities. And for a young student, like, that's an amazing exposure. That's
Yes.
something that really connects to them, like, visually, mentally, that I can go here, I can come here. And so, being able to kind of have that experience with them and the amazing support of the university was something also very unique.
Yes,
But
because you later went on to graduate school
I
at
did.
CalArts,
Yeah,
right?
I
Yeah.
did. I mean, I did. I knew that was, like I said, that was the first college that I was ever introduced for, and because of that program. And then later on, I did, as you know, work at CAP in terms of in their administrative capacity. And I knew the hard work that was out there. I knew that we were understaffed, but I just always felt like I was there once as a kid, and how important it was that any little extra effort on my part really meant like a lot to the kids wherever they were in the neighborhood. So I always have that in mind, even though we were had challenges, of course, of
Yeah,
everything
so
else.
you from middle school you were able to work with a teacher and a writer artist like Seshu Foster. Then that was fostered on through your high school experience, middle school, high school experience at Plaza de la Raza with people like BJ Dodge, the CAP program, Glenna Avila. And then when you were getting out of high school, you were also mentored, where we met our co mentor of Manasada Gamboa, who is a poet and playwright. And then the person we just got off the phone with, Dixie Swift. Can you tell, and Homeland Cultural Center in Long Beach, can you tell us a little bit about how you started working with Manasad and Dixie at Homeland? Can you tell
Yeah.
us about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I was always kind of dipping my hand in everything at that time. Like, I was in theater, I was in the arts, I was in writing, right? It was kind of that exploration time for me because, uh, that's how I am. Not that everybody does it, but I felt like I could do that, or I wanted to do that. So right before I met Manasar, I was helping my friend who now he's a great friend, Mario Davila,
Yes.
who is an amazing art supporter, artist himself, a director, ex-director of LA's Best, and I can't even talk about him enough because he has a long resume of all his activism in the community in Los Angeles. He is from here. Anyway, he had started, as always, as he's such a leader and initiator, and came up with this group called Poetic Action, which at the time he wanted to do. He wanted to just expose people to poetry all over LA, and so that's how that came about. And he said, Carla, you want to help me? You want to be my assistant? And, I was still young, like he's a little bit older than me. So I was in my teens. And I said, yeah. So how I met him, believe it or not, I met Mario at LACMA because Seshu Foster did a reading there. And Seshu, being the amazing teacher and mentor that he was, when I went to see him read, he called me out in front, like, hey, don't you have a poem in your backpack? And I was like, yeah, I think
He threw you to
so.
the
And had my
sharks.
little sketchbook. I was like, he knew that I
Yeah,
did,
he
you
threw you
know?
to the
I was
sharks.
like, damn. Like, so that's, I was like, I'm just here to see him. And now he put me all up in the front, right? But this is
On
how
blast, on
amazing my
blast.
mentors were. This is, that's how they always were. Like, we were going to go support and be in the background. And then they would call us out to be like the up front, right? So anyway, so then Mario Davila was in the audience, and that's how we met. So he knew that I was, that I wrote, that I liked poetry in that aspect. And so anyway, so Mario and I started this series, Poetic Action, and we would just go around and organize readings in these different coffee houses, libraries, nonprofit centers, anybody that would have us, and we
Yeah.
would bring an audience. And so when we were doing that, and he told me one of the speakers that we had planned for this event in this space in downtown LA didn't want to do it, or he thought he was too good. I don't know what happened, but
Didn't
anyway,
work
he
out.
didn't work out. And so he said, Carla, I met someone else, and I think he would be really great to be our feature speaker. And I said, who? And he said, it's Manasar Gamboa. He's a poet, a playwright. He spent some time in prison, got out. And I was like, whoa, what an interesting person. Yeah, let's have him. So that's how I met Manasar in that reading. And Manasar, I had to talk to him, and how Manasar was so gracious and with his time, just like you are, in terms of being able to spend time with young people. And so we started talking, and I said, I want to come. He said he was teaching classes on Saturdays in a community center here in Long Beach, right? The Homeland Cultural Center on the weekends, because he lived up in LA close to where I lived. And so he said, do you want to come? And I was like, yeah, but I was like, I don't know if I can take 5 buses, 600 buses to get to Long Beach. Like, I don't have a car. And he's like, I can pick you up. And I was like, yes, that's amazing. So,
Yeah.
so that's how I started coming and the Saturday workshops. And I remember it was so funny. I would always be like, I'm bringing cookies from the 99-cent stores to everybody that was in our workshop. And I think he saw, like, we had, besides him sort of guiding us and giving us really amazing, teaching us in the workshop about writing and poetry and telling us his stories again and sharing his stories, because he grew up, as you know, in Chavez Ravine in the 1940s and 50s, was very impactful for him, as he felt kind of pushed away from his home. And he had all of this experience that he was trying to tell his stories from his perspective, which was something that I didn't even know about. And I hadn't even known before I know him that this had happened. No history books or in schools, they don't tell you about this stuff. So it was really significant for me to connect with him on a human level. And when we had these long drives from LA to Long Beach every weekend and back, like, we had these amazing conversations that I think were the best teaching that anybody could get, besides being, in the actual skill level of how do you write a poem, how do you write a story, what is the feedback on that.
Yeah, so you had all these amazing mentors, teachers, people that invested in you with creative storytelling and all that stuff. And now we're here at our studios, Language Studios, 20th year anniversary. And how do you feel in terms of reflection in relationship to like how you've been able to invest in all of the mentees and artists that we've worked with? Now all the folks that we've been able to work with will have those stories about you. How do you feel and reflect about that?
I hope they have good stories. There has been some crazy stories too, but those keep them on the low low. Don't tell just everybody, not for the press. No,
No comment. No
no
comment on
comment,
that.
no comment. Shh, no, I feel like a mama, like a proud mama, in a lot of ways, because I feel uh, a lot of the young people that we have mentored, I see them thriving in their own ways. And I mean in their own ways is because I don't want to point as a singular pathway, because, as you know, in terms of art making, it's not just the hierarchical kind of strategy or way. I think their own ways is okay to be successful in their own right and
They
their
all
own
get in where
being.
they fit in, and that's
Yeah,
fine.
and I'm so so proud of them. And I feel like it's really, and some of them I think it's more like they're really get it in terms of how, at least I think I see that a little bit of the advice or what we tried to plant, or the seed that we're trying to plant, has they keep growing and they keep blooming. And so I just so proud of them. I feel really really valued, really seen, really amazing that I get to even hear their stories of what they're doing and how they're impacting the world and making changes in the world, and in terms of, like I said, just in the world in general, not even just in the arts, because some of them have not gone necessarily into the arts, but they're successful in their own being, and how they talk about things, how they're able to even be at this point in their lives with their families or their careers, even if it led them into a different direction. I think hearing their stories and connecting back to a little bit of what we kind of started is really really important. I mean, I think it's great to hear that.
Yes, I agree with you. But also, I wanted to be a good leader and to be a good model for other artists is to be an artist.
Right.
And you've been really focusing on that over the past couple of years. You've really focused on your art making, and you've been really fortunate to have taken off and had shows all over the place and all this stuff. And can you tell us a bit about the reflection process that you have for making sure that you solidify yourself as an artist within the community and how important that is?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think some of that stuff has been, yeah, like you lead by action, right? And I think some of that is has been really important in different ways, to, kind of reflecting on not only what's, because also when I was doing the community, a lot of the grassroots kind of hands-on with language, as you know, it was really taking a little bit of a step back in terms of my immediate work or producing something that's an object and thing, and saying, well, what can these artists, what do they need, what can we provide. So in that self-reflection, you're always thinking of the other in terms of what their needs are, how can we facilitate things, how what is needed, how what do we want to see as a group, as a collective. And I think that kind of breath takes a lot of energy, as you know. It takes a lot of stepping back and seeing, and also the challenges that we had. I mean, in terms of because even if we see something together, it doesn't mean that it's all going to come at once and there it is, right? It's like it takes a lot of conversation, it takes a lot of delegating, it takes a lot of leadership in that sense, and making decisions that sometimes are very hard economically, financially, space wise, group wise, selection wise, blah blah blah, right? But I think in that mode, I think I've always tried to be really confident and trying to connect back to myself and say what feels good, what doesn't feel good. um, how can I step back in terms of now focusing on my work, because I think this is the spacing and the time for myself that I want, that I need, right? That I think it's a right timing, for myself. And I don't think there is such a urgency as there was before when we were here, when we started this, because there is students that are going on to college. There are students that are, like I said, have been growing in that and have made an impact before. Before this, I don't think there was anything here. So I think that's the reflection period where once you plant a seed and it's growing, now what do? You plant your own seed and grow alongside of it.
Yeah, so you've been really proficient at that in terms of really focusing on your own art, and that's been great to see too. Also for me, because I also understand that sentiment that you're saying that we had to like kind of facilitate, and that takes a lot of energy. And But it's really great to see you being able to focus on your own work. And speaking about your own work, you're having a lot of opportunities to show. So can you plug some of the things that are coming up? I know there's a lot of great things, and people are always asking where the next Karla show is going to be. So right now you have some things up, some things coming up. What are they?
Yes. Okay. So right now I have a show that just opened at Charlie James Gallery. It's a group show. I'm part of a group show that has opened in tandem. It's called Southland Volume 2, and it's open in tandem with Patrick Martinez's solo exhibition at the gallery,
He
and he
curated
actually
though.
curated the show. Yeah, so I have one piece there, and I'm really excited to be working with Patrick. Period, because I respect his work, and he's been a long time friend. Then I have another show that it opens actually today that is on view in Pomona at the Chan Gallery. And I have a couple pieces, I think 3 or 4 pieces there. And it's also a group show. It's called Painting New Genres. But I'm really, really
And
excited
where is
to.
that specifically?
It's in the Chan Gallery in Pomona. I
Is that
know.
part of a university
Yeah, I
or?
think it's part of the University of Pomona College
Okay.
because, they have different
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
connect
So you have
buildings.
one up in Chinatown, one up in Pomona, and what else?
Well, I have a few things coming up. Maybe they can follow me and then they can go the stuff.
Yeah, so
But they have,
give
I have
us
a
your
show.
plugs.
Yeah, I mean, I have another show that's happening in the university in Arizona coming up,
That's
which
cool.
is a
Arizona
group
State
show. Again,
University
a group
Museum.
show. Yeah, I have a show coming up in San Francisco. It's a solo show, which I'm really, really excited about to be working with Deidre Weiser, who curated the show, who is a friend also, and she is putting up a catalog of the show, which I'm really, really excited for. And then we have the 20th year anniversary also for Slanguage coming up at Angels Gate, which I'm really super more excited about that because I can't wait to see everybody's work there. And I told everybody at Slanguage, I said, I'm going to put the smallest work there because I want you all to use the space and shine. So I made a little painting this small.
Cool. So you got Chinatown, Pomona, Arizona State
San
University,
Francisco,
San Francisco, and then
San Pedro.
San Pedro, California, with Angels Gate,
Oh, in
California.
Miami, my gallery, my amazing gallery, Luis de Jesus Los Angeles. So I'm so blessed to be. This is going to be our first year working together, right? We started working last year, so a year and a half, I think. Yeah. Anyway, we are gonna have. I'm gonna have 2 of my pieces in Miami for the Untitled Fair that is opening
Awesome.
in December. So yeah, so it's going good. I'm really blessed.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you, Karla, for taking some time out of your busy painting schedule at the moment because you're getting ready for all these shows to join me here for the second episode of Chop It Up.
Thank you.
I'm Mario
Thank you.
Ybarra Jr. here at Slanguage Studio. Peace.
Yay, awesome.